Hi, everybody. This is Tara Bradley with the Growth State. I am super excited to have Kristen Harris with us today. Kristen's the COO and co-founder of Portfolio Creative, which is a firm that helps clients find, hire, and manage top creative talent. It's an award-winning firm, women-owned business. They focus on short and long-term staffing, contract to hire, direct hire, engage search, contingent search, short-term, long-term, remote, all of the things that you can think of when you're looking for creative staff. Kristen and her partner handle. And Kristen, how I found Kristen, I was doing some research for this summit, and I happened to run across this article. And as I was reading it, she said, hire for values, not who you want to have beer with. So I was like, this is a woman I got to talk to. So I'm super excited to have her today. She speaks my language. I'm sure she speaks yours as well. Thank you so much for joining us today, Kristen. I'm excited to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, we'll jump in with some questions. We've only got about 30 minutes today, and we want to make sure we get all of our juicy tidbits in. So one question I love to ask all of our participants is, particularly those that have started their own business and they're looking in the services industry. You obviously had a point in your life where you're like, hey, something about this has to change. There was a pain point that says, I'm not going to work for someone else anymore. I'm going to go out on my own. I'm going to be an entrepreneur. What was that spot like for you that helped you make that decision?
So I think for me, it was really seeing a problem that I thought needed solved and wasn't being solved by anyone else. So I worked in the creative industry and marketing for about 13 years and just always found it really hard to find the right talent and just kept, sort of wondering why somebody didn't do something about it. Yeah. And at some point just decided that somebody was going to be me and my partner. So I think the pain point was really more solving a pain point that we had, in working in that industry. We could see up this problem and just felt sort of compelled to do something about it.
Yeah, and that makes a ton of sense. And I want to come back to this because I got a few other things that I want to really make sure we hit on the values. But I think for this group in particular, because I'm one of them, I think at this stage, if we're in the scaling business, we have a hard time figuring out what do we need for creative talent? What does that look like? And so it makes sense to me that being on the other side of the stage, trying to figure out where those opportunities are. And, it makes sense to me why you have all of these different offerings when you go out and do a search, because people really have very different strategies when it comes to their creative talent, marketing, and all of those things. So we'll come back to that, but I wanna hit on the thing that really piqued my interest was, you said hire for values, not someone you want to go have a beer with. Talk to me about that. Tell me your thought process on that and why you felt compelled to write that article. It was called something else, but that's the thing that sticks in my mind.
Yeah, something like that. Stop hiring for culture fit and start hiring for values or something like that. And it was a little bit, especially at the beginning of it, was a little bit of a confessional too, because in the last 15 years we've had this business, I've said the phrase culture fit probably thousands of times. Our clients want a culture fit. We're looking for a culture fit. Everything's a culture fit. Right. And honestly, I was on a call having a conversation about diversity earlier this year. And all of a sudden it just smacked me in the face that hiring for culture fit means you're just hiring more people just like you. And it's like the antithesis of, seeking diversity. And it just really got me started thinking about well, then what should we be hiring for? Like, if it's not this magic culture fit we're all talking about, then what is it? And I just kept coming back to values. I think, culture fit is like what we do. Like, yeah, we go out for beer together, or we all have happy hour, we have a bar cart or beanbag chairs, or, a chef makes lunch every day or whatever. That is not my office, but that sounds lovely. But to me, values are more about who we are and what we believe in. And if you are, to me, it's just kind of obvious, rather than hiring just people who are like me or who do the things I like to do, hiring the people that believe in what I believe in and care about the same things. That is just so much deeper to me and such a better, although also harder way to find and vet people.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and it's I think harder to define too, right? And especially I think about this stage of the business, when we're scaling. Sometimes I think we don't know, right? We don't haven't done the work. We can kind of loosely define our culture. Oh, we're fun. We have happy hour. We do those things. But it's a lot harder when you have to dig deep and say, this is what we value as a company. This is where these are the guardrails, what we will tolerate and what we won't. Have you had to have conversations with your partners and people that you talk to about just how do they define those values, and how do they get really clear when they're looking for a candidate to articulate that to make sure they're a good fit?
Yeah, so we've had to have a lot of different kind of conversation with people, and especially with ourselves. Like, it starts at home, right? And it is a lot about. I think you're right. When a company is starting up, you're in that startup mode. I think you tend to hire a lot of friends, family sometimes, people, at least people in your city, people in your previous industry, wherever you did before, probably people you knew from previous jobs. And, inherently those tend to be a lot of people who are kind of like you. And then they all recommend their friends and so on. It's very much your network, right? You're sort of reaching out into your network. And that's great, I think, for a while, especially in the beginning, because you have to find people that believe in your crazy idea. You're coming up with this brand new thing that perhaps no one has ever heard of, or certainly you haven't done before. And so you need people who believe in you. And a lot of times those are people that know you or know of you, your reputation in your industry or something like that. But as you get further along, and I think this is where, as a company's growing and you get into that more of the nuances and the opportunities that of what it's going to take to grow, it's going to that next level of hiring that next level of talent, that next level of type of person. And that's probably not someone worked with, are related to, or maybe even who lives in your city. Like, maybe they live somewhere else, but they're amazing. And so, yes, back to your question, like, that does drive a lot of challenging conversations, because sometimes they're conversations of pushing people out of their comfort zone. They're like, well, I just want another 2 people like that one over there. This person's great. Just find me 2 more people just like them. And sometimes it's having conversations around what they really need, which isn't necessarily what they think they need. Mm-hmm. So helping them figure that out, but getting down to like what matters to them, which comes back to that value piece. I think like what really matters is important. And, and I don't think I want to think that people are inherently good and don't do this purposefully. But a lot of times I think people use that culture fit, sort of like, well, I don't think that person's a culture fit, as kind of an easy dismissal of someone.
Yeah.
But I can say, in having conversations, especially around the diversity topic, from other people, especially someone who clearly is looking at that company and says, I don't necessarily look or seem like the people there, that phrase, not a culture fit, feels very much like discrimination. Right. And so I don't think people, I want to believe people are inherently good and don't want to do that, but they kind of maybe inadvertently are, or at least eliminating like lots of people that could be amazing for their team because they're not connected to them, similar to them, in the same social circles, went to the same kind of colleges, universities. They're just not in their network or in their circle.
Yeah.
And so it's a lot of pushing people out of their comfort zone.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to just hire out of your network and from people
Right, exactly. It's a very small universe then. And I love that you bring up the point that culture fit kind of feels like a cop out for, not having diversity, right? And I think back to that as well. I've worked with a lot of really small companies in some very, very small communities, and we have a great culture, and you get in there and everybody's, they think the same, they act the same. And I've had the benefit of working obviously with a lot of creative people, but developers as well, who I think kind of fall in that group. And they by nature see the world very differently sometimes, and they respond very differently. And if you're not good at hiring outside of your culture fit, you're going to miss some really great talent. So I love that you bring that up. And I think it goes far beyond the creatives and that type of people as well. But I think you obviously have a front row seat to that some of the rest of us don't, because that's the world that you live in every day. But I think it's really good to shine a light on that. And I have found the exact same thing. I've come from a company, not in the, too distant past, where, oh, we have a great culture, we have a great culture, we have a great culture. And as I got into it, I'm like, this culture's toxic. Like, what are you talking about? This is terrible. And it was that same thing. They were, a lot of nepotism, a lot of, people that had come from company to company to company, and very hard to get a diverse individual in there. And it was immediately, I'm not sure it's a culture fit. Even to the point they would have a culture interview, I'm not sure it's a culture fit. And you couldn't even get them past that spot. And it was a ton of work to get that reeled back in. And I do think a lot of it came from our creative group. We hadn't invested in that space. We started to invest, and they see the world a lot differently, I think, than some other people. And so it helped, with that value piece, but we didn't go as far. Go ahead.
It's interesting. I was just thinking as you were saying that, like, so we're both women in business, right? How many years ago would have been like, we couldn't work somewhere. It was mostly white men who worked in companies, ran businesses. Like, we would be such a hard hire to have them consider one of us. So it's evolution, but like somebody pushed out of their comfort zone and then pushed more and more. Now we don't think anything of it.
Right.
It's just continuing that.
Evolve. Sure. Yeah, no, I totally agree. And one of the things that I have found when you really hire for values is you start to value those people that aren't like you. I can think back to a hire that I had, and when I first brought her on, she made me crazy. Like, literally, I could not get her to make a decision. And what I realized was she just needed more time to process, and I am not that person. And once I realized that, she became one of my biggest assets on my team, because if she needed time to process, it was a good cue to me that the team was also going to need that time. And we were going to have to be very thoughtful about how we took it back to them. And I'm not sure I would have hired her had I not been thinking, already down that path. Like, I needed a diverse group here. And so I think that you putting a name to it for me, was that values piece was incredibly helpful. And it's given me a perspective as I think back to some of those situations that was the difference, right? That we were looking for the value fit and what they brought to the role, and not necessarily that culture fit.
Yeah, and I think your example is a perfect instance of diversity, because, like, when I say diversity, I mean in all ways. Of course, we think of maybe racial or ethnic background or gender, other things like that, but it is all of that and so much more. It's their behavioral style, their emotional style, their way of thinking or processing, and the more variety, I guess I think of sort of as a circle, and you're just looking for lots of different pie wedges, but you don't want all the wedges over here. Right. You want your whole pie filled with all different slices of types of people. And like you said, like, those people can be so valuable. Like, if she needed time, then probably other people did too. But if you just had a whole team of like quick decision makers, you'd be running around, doing things right and left, chasing every shiny object. And maybe she helped you like slow down, consider the options, maybe what was she bringing, because she did think so differently. So I think diversity in all the ways is to me the goal. Every person, when I hear culture fit, I hear you fit in because you're like us. And when I hear diversity or values fit, values fit means to me like you believe what we believe, and diversity is you add to what we are. Like, instead of fitting our culture, you expand it, you enhance it, you add on something different, not you fit in the same box we're already in.
Has that perspective changed the way you interact with your partners? And so as you're going to them and talking about what they need in a role, does it even change the job description to say, hey, we don't want to know, take the boxes on the technicalities. We want to know what do you value and what they bring to this role and what they're bringing to the company. Has that evolved the conversation that you're having with your clients at all?
Yes, and I think what it really is we're asking more questions, not different. Like we have to identify the skill set,
Exactly,
that's required, and does this person have the skills and maybe work experience or whatever required to do the job. Like basically, can they do the job? Because that's the bar. Like if they can't do the job, then the rest of it doesn't matter.
right.
But I think we dig a lot deeper into that next level, maybe then sometimes then they're prepared for us. Like you ask a lot of questions. Like, yes, we do. But that's on purpose because when we work with a lot of amazing creative talent and a lot of great companies, and they are all wonderful in their own way, but there are good matches and there are bad matches. They're not every person is for every company and vice versa. So if we really want to make sure we're making the right match, we have to know what's most important to both sides. It's on the talent side too, the values just as well. They have the things that are important to them that are really going to matter in their life. And a lot of times those are, personal kind of things that really matter to them. So it's finding that alignment so that they're fitting well with the company after you've already, crossed the bar that they can do the job.
Right. Yeah. What advice would you give to people that are hiring, and not just in the creative role, but in any role where they're making that fit? I know in our organization, what we've typically done, and now that I think back to it, I'm like, I probably should have done it differently. But, I've always had my leaders hire for job fit, right? You make sure they technically can do all the things that they need to do. But as a final interview, I always do, and they call it the culture interview. I should probably call it the value interview now. But I'm asking questions and I've had them sit in and they're like, you ask the craziest questions that have nothing to do with this job. And I'm like, I ask the crazy questions that have everything to do with them being successful here. How do we transfer those skills so they get a little bit lower in the process and they start to understand how they are screening for values as well as technical capabilities?
At the manager level
Yeah.
too, hiring manager. Yeah. So first of all, we actually hire very similar to you. So we leave it up to the hiring manager on our team to decide if this person can do the job and you want them to work for you. Because if they don't, there's no point in taking any of my time to meet them, right? So we let them sort of get to that first cut, and then my partner and I or some members of our leadership team will meet with the person. And it really is very similar to what you said. Like, we don't really talk about the job because I will make the assumption you can do the job or you wouldn't be sitting here. So we're asking all kinds of questions around our values, or trying to get them to, tell stories. It's a lot of the behavioral interview type questions to get them to talk about past instances where maybe that value of growth or passion or something may have shown itself in their life, and trying to figure out how they handle that and what those things mean to them. Mm-hmm. So yeah, very, very similar to you. But I do believe that because we have worked really hard to embed our values into our whole team, it does run deep. So I don't think that our hiring managers would bring someone to the table that didn't meet our values, or that they didn't feel did meet those values, because it's sort of it's just kind of ingrained. Like we're all always thinking about those things. So it would be hard for them to not have a red flag go up if it was like, ooh, I don't think this person's interested in growth and they're not going to fit here if they just want to keep doing the same thing every day for 10 years.
Yeah.
Or, whatever that trigger is. So I guess circling back to your question, the long answer probably is just getting those values embedded at every level in your company, that people know what they are. And after a while, they just become part of your culture. Like, I like that use of the word culture there. They become who you are and how people think and act and behave every day. I think values are how you behave when no one's watching,
Right.
And so you have to get them so embedded, because it doesn't work if if it's only how people behave when I'm around.
Right.
You know, it has to be, especially I think about right now, we're all working remotely. So it's how they behave every day. No one is watching, you know, they could do whatever they want.
Right.
But they're absolutely 100%, you know, doing what needs to be done because we all share this belief of what we're trying to do and where we're trying to go.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And, you know, one of the things that I want to share with our viewers, if you haven't done the work on the value piece yet, I highly encourage you to do that. We have another speaker, Chris Halberg, who talks about that, and it's kind of the basis of the EOS system. We've got another speaker, Jeff Munn, who will talk about that as well. But one of the things that I think that you can also do if you're not there yet, don't get freaked out, don't stop hiring. But one of the things that I found incredibly effective, and I'm guessing Kristen has too, is be crystal clear about the environment they're coming into. Be really transparent. I know a lot of people go into the interview process saying, oh, you got to sell them on the position. I want to sell them on why they don't want the position. I want to paint the worst. And I've told people, I'm like, you don't want to work here. Like, it's crazy, you know, because we're in startups. I do startups and scale all the time. And it is a crazy, chaotic world. I find it's really a lot easier to get down to those value questions if I'm very clear about our pain points and why we're looking for a specific skill set. And then saying, how do you respond to that? What's your story? And, you know, what's your background in dealing with something like that? And I'm sure you've run into the same thing, Kristen.
Yeah, absolutely. I laugh when you say that because I do the same thing. I sort of paint for them their worst day. This is going to be your worst day as a recruiter or whatever. Like, here's all the things you're going to have to do that are terrible. And we all hate it. Like, we can all admit that's terrible, but it's part of the job.
Yeah.
And, we have to let people go. Like, on our client's behalf, they call us and say, hi, I would like for this person to leave. Guess who that is doing that, you know? And you're saying that to a recruiter whose biggest thrill is like finding someone a job. So their worst day is having to let somebody go, you know, that's not fun. So absolutely, we talk about that because how they can handle that and still say, yeah, I think this is a job that I'm interested in, even though I know some of the days won't, you know, not every day is sunshine and roses,
right.
But I can envision myself, even on that worst day, I can handle it. And the best days sound amazing, then that's fine. But yeah, I just sort of try to scare them off a lot and just see how it goes. And I think I'm so glad you're having some speakers about values and that you mentioned EOS because that's where that journey all started with us too. And I just think, sometimes I think people get so overwhelmed and scared by it, but especially in a startup or like a founder-led company, I don't think it's too terribly difficult because a lot of it usually comes from that person or
right.
those people, the partners, or whoever it is, the founders. A lot of it is the core of who they are. That's going to evolve into the company values because it just is what the company is all founded on. Yeah. So, sometimes I think it's not as challenging as it sounds.
Yeah.
You sit down and start talking about it and it becomes very obvious quickly, things that like, yeah, that's cool. This I really care about, or that I could, and here's my test is like, would I fire somebody over that? Would I hire someone? Would I fire them for it? Would I promote them for it?
Right.
And there are lots of things that I think are great and nice, but I wouldn't. And then there are some things like, yeah, I would. And it's a small handful, and those are our values.
Right. That's a great point. And I love that you brought up, and we could go for 2 hours on this topic. So I'm just going to hit it briefly because I think it's such a valid point. And I want this group to get perspective because they're all there, right? In that as an entrepreneur, founder, CEO, leader of a startup and scaling company, it is so much about your person, right? It's so much about what you believe personally. But you have to also remember that the people that you bring in, you want them to believe in those values, that you want them to own them, but they're not as personally involved as you are. And unless you can be vulnerable and really articulate, you know, the core of what you're thinking, and just like you said, this is something I won't tolerate and this is something I'll reward, it takes longer to get through that value journey. You really have to be willing to open up and be vulnerable and say, this, I care deeply about this, and this is why it's part of our mission. And I think I was terrible at that. And I've had some painful stories that we could get through that and why it was better because I did get there. But I think a lot of us are in that boat where it's like, I'm already put my butt on the line. I'm starting this company. I just need someone to believe in me. I don't want to say something stupid for them to not believe in me. And I think we close up because of that, but it's so critical to getting down that value path and opening up and telling why you're so passionate about that, because they've got to buy that passion to kind of fuel them to the next step too.
I think that's a great insight, because I think entrepreneurs often say this thing of like, why doesn't everyone else think like me? Why does everybody else just see the same things I do and just do it? Why don't they just jump in and take care of that thing the way I would? And the answer is like, because they're not you. They have signed on to this idea, but like they're different people and they have different motivations and so on. But I think the values can be a way of maybe bridging that gap, of saying like, I know you're not me and I can't expect you to be me. And frankly, I don't want you to be me. I want you to be yourself. But here's how I can show you like that trigger that I would be like, why doesn't somebody just take care of that? These are the 5 things that I will say that about every time. So if you see these things happening, go ahead and take care of it.
Yeah.
I think it's a way to cross that gap of like, why doesn't everybody think like me? Maybe I can tell you how I think more by sharing the values.
Yeah. No, I love that. We're about out of time, but I want to circle back to a question that we started at the beginning. And because of your specific expertise in creatives, I'd love for you to share from your perspective, if I'm a scaling company, I maybe don't have a deep marketing department, I'm outsourcing a lot of it. From your perspective, what's the kind of critical hire in a scaling organization in that creative space that you can kind of build a team around if you need to, or they can decide whether to outsource? What's, from your perspective, what's kind of the anchor?
Yeah, I love this question because we work through this every day with our clients and even for ourselves. So I feel like when a company is growing, probably the role in like a marketing creative kind of position that is most useful initially, and of course it depends on how big the company is, but I think that you need someone who is figuring out the strategy and the direction of the marketing and can execute some, because you don't want to have to outsource everything,
right?
So in a way it tends to be a bit of a general marketer who knows a little bit about a lot of things, but they know enough to have a good perspective of what the options are and to know when to bring in experts. And then I always think about, do I need this every day or every week, or do I need this once? Like if I need a new website, I'm probably going to just bring in an expert or a team of experts, a writer, designer, developer to build a website. And I'm not going to do that again for like 2 or 3 years, right? But I do need my internal marketer to be able to like maybe make some edits and updates to it. But the heavy lifting, the creating of that website, we're not rebuilding a website,
right,
all the time. So it's like, is this a one-time kind of thing, or is this ongoing? Like social media to me is something that's ongoing. People pretty much, post every day, right, and going out to lots of platforms, creating content. A lot of that happens very continuously. So I think having that on your team just makes it quicker, gives you more control over it, as opposed to something that's like very intermittent or,
mm-hmm.
I say one time, I mean, you rebuild your website every so often, but
yeah,
not
exactly.
so often. So I think that I think you need somebody who's helping you develop strategy, and whether you outsource that, tap into higher level experts periodically to give you some different perspectives. A lot of times, like a partner or one of the founders will have a good perspective on that, of generally, here's how I think we should be marketing ourselves, or here's what I think the right opportunities and channels are. And then you need someone who can do a lot of essentially the day-to-day execution, right, like who is actually making all those posts and writing articles and getting all this stuff done and out into the world, I think having that person who can just execute, quickly and continuously tends to be the hire that you need, because you don't necessarily want to have to be outsourcing that.
Right. Yeah. I think that's a great idea. And, it gives us the opportunity to bring in somebody that we feel is high potential and grow and stretch them and make them part of the leadership team and build around them, which for me is the most fun to do. And we've seen that work well in a couple of companies, even to the point where, we had one resource that was so good. He kind of built out his own little ad agency. And we're like, when we sold, we're like, this is a critical piece of how we do our business. Like, this has become, so critical. And he was a lead gen guy when we first got him. And so it was fun to see that. And so I love that. I love that perspective, because it gives you a great opportunity to grow into that value fit, right? And grow it into your leadership team. And they know from the get-go what's important, and they can build that team around them.
Yeah, and if I can add one more thing, because what you just said reminded me, I think that ultimately you really have to think about or be clear about like what you expect your marketing to do. So that person, the example you gave, you originally hired a lead gen person because you clearly said, what do we need marketing to do? We need it to generate leads. Yeah. So we're going to hire somebody who does that kind of work. And I think that is the trickiest part with like marketing and creative roles, is it all seems kind of squishy and you're not quite sure how to measure it and what you want out of it. Is it just brand exposure? Is it design? Is it social content? Like, you have to be really clear about what you're trying to get from it, so then you find the right person to do that type of work. There's all types of marketing people, and you need to find the right one, obviously, to execute what you want it to deliver, what you expect from it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I know we're about out of time. Kristen, I appreciate you meeting with us today. For anybody that's watching, if they want to get connected with you or learn more about what you do, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Oh, great. Thank you. Yes. Thanks for having me. This is really fun. I'm with you. I could talk about this for hours.
Yeah.
And will with anyone who wants to. So the easiest way to find me really is our website, which is portfoliocreative.com. And I'm on there. My email's on there. I'm just very easily found. So either through our website, or I'm on LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to find on LinkedIn too.
Perfect. Well, we'll have your information on your bio page too. They can click through that. Again, thank you so much for your time. Like I said, we could sit and chat for hours. Maybe we will one day when we can meet face to face and have a cocktail or something. I don't know. Have that beer.
Exactly.
Awesome.
A nice sparkling water would be.
That's right. That's right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kristen. You have a great day, and I look forward to chatting with you again.
Thank you.